Hello. I would like to tell you some stories today. Back in 1967, a new TV show, Dragnet, used this opening. The story you are about to see is true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. My stories are also true, and I do not name any names. So, let's get started. I would like to tell you about my first car and what I did with it. My dad came from a family with 7 boys. He was born in 1917, and he and his brothers all enjoyed working on cars while they were growing up. When I was 14 or so, Dad gave me and my younger brother a 1949 Plymouth. Neither of us had a driver's license, but we lived in a small farming community where kids grew up driving tractors and farm machinery, so our part-time local law enforcement wasn't a problem. The body was green, so we called the car the Green Hornet after the TV show. With a little work, we got the engine to run pretty well, but the body was trashed. So after a search, we located another 1949 that had a better body, but no engine. We planned to swap the bodies. In those days, you could unbolt the fenders and bumpers and the hood and the trunk lid and take off all the doors and do all the wiring and things like gas lines, then unbolt the body from the frame and the whole body will just lift off, which we did. It took a while, but we learned as we worked. After we were done, we looked at the frame with the engine on it and we saw the possibility of some fun. We had the makings of a dragster or a rail job. We wired a 4x4 to the frame and then wired the bench seat to it. The clutch and brake were fastened to the frame, so they were ready to go. The gear shifter linkage down to the transmission was removed with the body, so we used our foot to move the transmission levers. We found the first gear and third gear, but we never could find second gear. We had reverse. A gas pedal and gas tank were also gone with the body, so we borrowed a lawnmower tank and tied it to the top of the radiator above the carburetor, so the gas would just flow downhill into the carburetor. We hooked a long flexible wire to the carburetor linkage and just pulled on it. That was our gas pedal. Don't laugh, it worked. The hardest part was the electrical system we would need to start and keep it running. But with no lights, dashboard stuff, or signals, it wasn't that hard. We wired a battery on the frame and figured it out. We were ready to ride. We learned that it would burn rubber just fine in third gear, so we hardly ever had to shift gears. If we let the clutch out normally or pulling our gas wire back quickly, we could leave some long, impressive skid marks. If we revved up the engine and popped the clutch, the back end would start jumping up and down, leaving skid marks with spaces and jumps over side to side. We painted a lot of road that month. If we operated the clutch correctly and got going without letting the tires slip, and then pulled back on the gas wire, we had amazing acceleration. It was just plain fun, and we didn't want to stop using it. But I ruined our fun. A friend and I decided to take a trip out of our city into another city canyon. We could get to it by back roads, and we figured that we would be safe. And driving a canyon road would be fun on our rail job. While going up the canyon, we had the misfortune of passing a city cop coming down the canyon. Of course, we panicked and ran for it. It was a twisty road, and we were able to turn off on a utility road and hide behind some trees. We saw him go past through the trees, so we pulled back out and headed home. But we didn't wait long enough. He must have seen us in his rearview mirror and turned around to chase us. We actually outdrove him on the rail job, or so I thought at the time. Now, I believe he was just letting us go to see where we went. Driving very recklessly, we made it back home, jumped off the rail job and ran behind my house to hide. The city cop drove into my driveway, got out and said, "Come on out, boys." We did. He looked at us and at the rail job and threw his cigarette onto the ground and ground it out with his boot, just like on TV. Then he said, "Keep it off the road, boys," got in his car and left. We were astounded. What luck! Where are the movie cameras when you really need one? When I told Dad about it, he wasn't as happy. He decreed that we get working on putting the other body back on, which we said we would, but didn't do much. But first, let us jump ahead to 1969. I had just returned from Ireland and got a job dispatching for that city's police department. The officer was still there, and he remembered my rail job in the canyon chase. We had a good laugh, and I found out why he didn't clap us in cuffs and march us off to jail. He was out of his jurisdiction and didn't think it was worth the paperwork to pursue. And I think he kind of admired our rail job and still had a little teenager left in him. But I don't think the cops today have much fun in their life, so don't build your own rail job. It was another time and a different world back then. Okay, now let's go back to 1963. After getting chased home by the cop, Dad said we had to put the other body on the frame. And we started, sort of, but first we had to do one more experiment. My brother and I were curious. What would happen if we jammed the standard transmission into reverse while going about 30 miles an hour forward? We had a spare transmission that came with a second 1949 Plymouth body we had picked up, so why not try it? The answer to that question is it immediately locks up the rear wheels and leaves unbelievable skid marks on the pavement. That was so much fun, we did it a second time, and it did the same thing again. The third time, it breaks a bunch of stuff in the transmission. So now we both know. Just for curiosity, I took the transmission apart to see what it had done. Good thing we didn't need to repair it. A bunch of the gear teeth were broken off. My brother and I put the second body back on. It wasn't really difficult for most of it, but we hadn't paid a lot of attention to the wiring under the dash when we took the first body off. I thought we pretty much had it, except the headlights had a tendency to go out without notice, and sometimes there were electrical sparking sounds under the dash. We learned that the immediate fix for these problems was to reach up under the dash and wiggle the wires around. The headlights would usually come back on and the sparking usually stopped. My sister was getting married and my family were ready to go to her reception one evening when I got home late. I told them to go, and I would drive the Plymouth to the reception as soon as I was cleaned up. They left, and when I was ready, I did too. It was fully dark, and I turned on the headlights. Sure enough, they went out soon after I started up the road. I reached under the hood to shake the wires, but it wasn't working. While occupied with the wires, I drifted off the road and crashed into my neighbor's car parked on the side of the road in front of his house. It crumpled my front fender. Before getting out to inspect the damage, I could hear a funny noise. I got out and found out our neighbor had staked his goat by his car so he could eat the weeds in the irrigation ditch. Back then, we didn't have curb and gutters, just irrigation ditches along some of the roads. When I hit his car, I had stopped on the goat's rope and pinned his head down by the wheel. And he was complaining as loudly as he could. That was the noise. Of course, our neighbors came out and helped free him. And they called my dad and the police. I got a citation for driving without a license. I was only 15. And I missed a lot of my sister's wedding stuff. And I was a shamefaced guy. One of my best friends lived in that home. Well, I still have another story about the 1949 Plymouth, but not today. It's in part 2. Thanks for watching.